welcome everybody to 2 weeks left in the semester. So I got 3 backgrounds. I'll let you guys pick which ones. This is called Loneliness. This one's called Drowning in Sorrow. And this one's called In the Snow. So put your votes in Endless Snow. In the Snow. Alright, yeah, it's kind of cool. I don't know what's going on here, but she's like walking through snow and clutching an amulet or something. Drowning in Sorrow for finals week. Alright, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay, so depressing, yeah. Alright, so let's do a little bit more Python today. Okay. So it talks a little bit about the use of Python, things like that. How to install coding tools for Python development. So sometimes these steps here don't necessarily work. I haven't had any trouble recently, but the first time I did this assignment, these steps didn't work. So if that is the case, let me know. But I do want you having Visual Studio Code installed if that's your jam. VS Code runs on every platform, so you should be able to get that going. Right. So last time we talked a little bit about basic arithmetic in Python. And so in Python, you can just start with a very simple depressing. Python's depressing or the background? So in Python, you can just start off with like really basic, easy stuff: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and then there is exponentiation and integer division and remainder as well. So it's kind of what we talked about last time. In Python, it's a little bit different from C++ if you've done C++ before. In C++, if you make a variable, you have to tell it what type the variable is. So you have to say, I'm making a variable named x, and x holds floating point numbers. It holds numbers with decimals in it. Or I'm making a variable named x that holds only whole numbers. Things like that. Python doesn't exactly work the same way. And so you can just make a variable and set it to something, and then it'll figure out the type of that thing from the right-hand side, right? So this is a variable named number of rocks, and it's an integer. This is a variable called temperature in space, and it's a float. Here's a variable named rover name, and it's set to a string. This is a Boolean. Booleans are either true or false, like we do with our truth tables and things like that. Okay. And then if you ever want to print a value, you can just do that, or activate sandbox. It's probably going to spin up the container. Yeah, so in C++ or Java, you do something like that, right? But you don't need to do that in Python. Now, this thing here didn't work because it's like, I've never heard of this rover name thing before, right? And that's because I did not run the earlier chunks of the Jupyter Notebook, right? So the way the Jupyter Notebooks work, it's like a program in a traditional sense where you just have a text file, but it's kind of broken up into strips. And so you have to run this program before you can run this program, and then it works. Okay. So there is, in fact, a run all, and then that will run all of the things in order down the row. And you can see all of these things have now run, and yeah. Okay. So if you get an error like that last one there, it's because if you just click on one of the things, you don't click on the other thing, then I've never met this man in my life, you know, Rover Man. How much experience is the whole assignment? What specifically do you want a screenshot of? I want 5,000 XP is the whole assignment. And I want a screenshot of the kind of title page up here showing that you've done 5,000 XP. Just one screenshot is good enough. Is it possible for you to just kind of click through everything and lie that you did it? Sure. If you know Python already, you can do that. It's fine. And I'm not saying you specifically, Emily. I'm just saying in general, yeah, sure, you just click through and get some free points. But then are you going to know Python at a well enough level to answer a simple question on the final? Probably not. All right? So I'll probably have to give you guys a separate homework assignment here. We'll have a very, very simple Python program just to make sure that you paid attention during the Jupyter notebooks. Okay. So this here is making a variable named basalt rock count, setting it equal to 0. This one changes its value to 3. This one increases its value by 1. Now, for math people, this looks like it's like it doesn't make sense to math people, right? Because you cancel the basalt rock count on both sides, you end up getting 0 equals 1. And that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is that it's reading the value of basalt rock count, which is 3, adding 1 to it, and then saving the result of this into basalt rock count. So this is incrementing the value of basalt rock count by 1. And if you print that, you'll see the value is now 4. There are shorthand ways of doing that. So if you want to add 3 to something, you don't have to say basalt rock count equals basalt rock count plus 3. You can just say plus equals 3, minus equals 2, add 3, minus 2. You can combine variables together. And so we're setting an astronaut equal to a string. That will uppercaseify a string. So Stanley G. Love. Is that a real astronaut? I guess so. There. From San Diego. All right. Computer programming instructor. Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool. All right. Yeah, so that changes Stanley G. Love like that to Stanley G. Love, all caps, right? Because dot uppercaseifies things. Dot lowercaseifies things. Everything becomes a lowercase letter. So you can glue 2 different strings together with a plus operator. Cape Canaveral, Florida can be glued together with a plus. So it becomes one thing like that. And you can repeat a string using multiplication. Okay. So any questions about that? Like you can see, it's kind of straightforward, right? Does that kind of make sense? Like you just kind of go through it. And I recommend you do something like this, right? As you go through, just change the notebooks and then hit run, and you can see that it repeats 5 times down. Well, what if I put in a negative number here? Let's see what happens, right? You're not going to break anything. You're not going to crash the computer. You're not going to, you know what I mean? Like, you're not going to, cause Microsoft to go out of business because you typed in a negative number there. Like, what I want you to do is not just read through it, but to actually, change the values and run it a few times and get a feel for how it works. Okay. So this is a data structure. There's a whole class in the computer science department called data structures, and then there's oftentimes upper division data structures and graduate level data structures. This is a very simple data structure because it's Python, right? So what it means, a data structure is something that holds multiple variables, let's say. So this thing here is holding 3 variables, 3 strings, in fact. 1 basalt, 1 highland, 1 breccia. Okay. So if we run all the stuff here, dang it, what's the matter, Raymar? So you can see if you just print it out like that, and you can also print it by doing this, right? Print that. Get the same result, basically. So, yeah, there you go. There's a list of values. Three variables. Nothing makes sense. Okay. And they can have mixed types here. So this is a list containing some strings, some floats, some integers. Handles it just fine. If you want to add something to a list, dot append. So if we want to copy, like I said, just play around with it, right? This is really important. It's a really important skill in computer science to just like play around with things. Like, okay, let's see. Can I have duplicates? You know, let's try this. You know, and run. There we go. Okay. I wasn't sure if I clicked it or not. And you can see, okay, so we had base on okay, and then what if we run it again? Oh, look, it gets bigger. Because every time you run it again, it appends more things to the list. Because remember, this whole document here is a program, but every time you hit run, it runs that chunk of code over and over again. So you can see I can sit there and just make the list bigger and bigger. You can delete a thing off the end of the list. So delete Canada's at the end, bananas at the end, apples at the end, soils at the end. All right. So a lot of times you don't actually want to run just one chunk of code like that repeatedly because it's going to screw up. So it's quite common for people to run all. And that goes from the top. And you can see we don't have duplicates from running a chunk multiple times. Right? If you want to get element 1 out of it, you can use square brackets. So you might be like, wait, element 1 should be basalt, right? Because basalt's the first element in the list. Well, yeah, in computer science, with almost no exceptions, there's one exception I can think of. Two exceptions I can think of. With almost no exceptions. See how you qualify your statement with qualifiers? With almost no exceptions. In computer science, we start counting from 0, not from 1. So the first element in the list is square bracket 0. The second element in the list is square bracket 1. So the second element in the list here is Highland. And so square bracket 1 gives us Highland. 0, 1, 2. This is something very common in computer science. Okay. And you can change it this way. Square brackets equal to something, and then you can change that to soil. If we do 0 is equal to Dwayne Johnson. Did I not spell it right? The Y. Now you'll see that Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is in our list of rocks here. Do you know which companies use Python? Yeah, like a lot of them. It's the most popular programming language out there. Python's used literally everywhere. I just had a friend of mine come give a guest lecture. He works for a company called ASML, which is a very important company, by the way. The company was spun off from Philips, the light bulb company, right? And what they make are the lasers that make chips. Okay, and they're the only company in the world that makes chips at the high end. The only company that makes lasers that make the chips at the high end. Okay, so they have basically a monopoly on the technology that goes into making, all the chips that go into your cell phones and your monitors and your computers and your air conditioning systems and all that kind of stuff. Maybe not your air conditioning systems. You can probably use older processes for that, but for any of the cutting edge stuff, for cell phones and CPUs and things like that, GPUs, all of them use ASML lasers, and they use Python. So, yep. Yeah, and a friend of mine worked for them, and he went through the process of how chip manufacturing works and stuff like that. So, they use C++, they use Python. Yeah. I was down at Hackerspace yesterday, root access Hackerspace here in town. Have any of you guys heard of this place? Got 14 people on chat right now. You can say no too. So here's Fresno City College. So you take 41 south, head over on McKinley. Here's Fresno City College. Make a left, and it's a one-way, so you kind of have to navigate around a little bit. But yeah, it's like right here there is a hackerspace, and pretty cool place, by the way. It's pretty neat. And they do Python workshops every month. The local Python club meets at the Hackerspace every month. And let's see here, classes, sewing. You want to learn to sew? I saw them using the laser cutter yesterday. That was pretty cool. We did a field trip over there. It's pretty neat. It's mostly just sewing classes right now, it looks like. But they also teach soldering and all sorts of stuff. So they have a pretty cool setup. And yeah, and so the local Python club in Fresno meets there every month, and they do lessons and things like that. So the question of like where Python is used, it's the answer is like everywhere. Like it's very commonly used. If you want to go into data science, which this thing is made for, it's to kind of introduce you to data science a little bit. Python and R are the two languages used, and SPSS, I guess, are used all throughout the data science world. One person heard of it. Yeah, it's a cool place, and if you're into like crafting things, if you're a crafty person, if you like making things with your hands and breadboarding and soldering and spray painting and woodworking and stuff like that, it's a cool place. There's also IdeaWorks downtown as well. That's pretty cool. Okay, let's run through Python real fast. Okay, we can do math. Here, and so it's pointing out that you aren't going to see the number 4 here because it's only going to print the final value here, the 8. So if you want to print out intermediate values, you can call print multiple times. You'll print 6 in hello world. Yeah, and you can print multiple things like that. Little quiz you got to complete. All right, so that's the basic idea, right? You just kind of go through that. The control statements is really important. We're only 20 minutes in. Let's go through that as well. Okay. So Python looks a little bit different from C++ and Java if you've done that before. In C++ and Java, it's called a curly brace language, where you use curly braces to have blocks of code. So you say if this, then curly brace in a block of code, else block of code. Python uses indentation to, let's see if we can, there we go. Python uses indentation to indicate blocks of code. So if something is true, then do all the stuff that's indented after it. So if the number of basalt rocks we have equals 0, then print we have found no basalt rocks. One thing you should be careful of newbies that have never programmed before is that 2 equals and 1 equals sign are very, very different. 1 equals sign is assignment. In other words, set the variable basalt equal to 0. 2 equals is comparison. In other words, is the amount of basalt equal to 0, right? And so this does not set the number of basalt rocks to 0. It checks to see if it's 0. Okay. Does Python have the triple equals? Are you a JavaScript person? No, I don't think so. And can you do a single equals inside of an if statement? I think it's going to get mad at us. Yeah. C++, this is legal to do 1 equals sign there. In Python, it is most certainly not. So, all right. Yeah. So you can say if, and then inside of the parentheses here, you put your conditional. So you can do things like say greater than or equal to 0, right? You can say less than or equal to 0. Right? We found no basalt rocks. Now, if we set basalt equal to 5, then rather than doing this one, it's going to do this one. Why? Well, let's run through it real fast. Basalt is equal to 5. If basalt is less than or equal to 0, it's not. So then if it's not, we do the else statement instead. And we print, we found some basalt rocks. Okay. If we set basalt equal to -5, which I don't know how you find negative rocks. Maybe you lost some, I don't know. We have found no basalt rocks. Okay. This is the basic syntax for doing if and else in Python. Where basically you say if, and then inside of the parentheses you put a conditional of some sort, and I think the previous page showed you the options equal to, not equal to, less than or equal to, less than, greater than or equal to, are the 6 basic ones. And if you want to chain together multiple things, if basalt equals 0, else if basalt equals 1, else, and it's elif, else if. And you can do as many of those as you want. Okay. And then to repeat things in Python, you can use while loops and for loops. So for every planet in planets, print the name of the planet, and so that will print Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter. So it's called a range-based for loop in C++. For every planet in planets, print planet, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter. While countdown is greater than or equal to 0, print countdown. Countdown equals countdown minus 1. So this is a loop. Is countdown greater than or equal to 0? Yes. Okay. So it's going to print 5, and then it's going to decrement countdown by 1. It's going to go down to 4, and then it repeats. And it's going to keep repeating until countdown hits -1. Right? So if we run this, you can see it goes t equals 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, liftoff. Okay. Very, very NASA right there. And so this loop runs 6 times, by the way, right? It's one of the reasons why I don't like this structure here, because students oftentimes have an off by 1 error. How many times is it going to print something? 5. 6. Because it's greater than or equal to 0. Okay. HTML is your favorite programming language. Maybe you had 5 but lost them all. Yeah. Negative. Yeah. I had 5 rocks and then I lost them, so I found -5 rocks on my trip. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we got here a infinite loop, right? Do you see this? Stop. Like, so this is an infinite loop. Does anyone know why it's an infinite loop? We set a variable here named timer equal to 10. We say while timer is greater than 0, print, hello, I'm from Earth. So we got, scrolling up, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Not 10. Why is this thing running forever? How does a program process infinity? You just saw it. This is an infinite loop. It will just keep running. In the Jupyter Notebook, it has a timeout value set, and it will kill your program if you exceed the timeout value. So none of these cells can run longer than whatever the timeout value is. So if you saw, I scrolled up to the top, and where was it? Here, interrupt, and that will stop the thing from running forever. So what do I need to do to fix this? Right. So if we go through the logic on this, we have a variable named timer. It's equal to 10. Is timer greater than 0? Yes, 10 is greater than 0. Okay. If it is, then we print everything inside of the loop. And then we go back up to the top of the loop. Is timer still greater than 0? Yep, it's still 10. Do it again. Is timer still greater than 0? Yep, it's still 10. Do it again. And we just sit there and run forever. So what do we need to add? What do we need to do to count down the timer properly? Timer equals timer minus 1, or you just say timer minus equals 1, right? And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now it runs properly, right? C++ people are probably familiar with this construction here. Yeah, like the C++ language is literally like a joke on this syntax. Minus minus means the same thing as minus equals 1, but yeah. So yeah, C++ literally is a joke on, it's the C language plus plus. It's one better than C, right? And I don't think it was meant in a mean way. Bjarne Stroustrup was friends with Dennis Ritchie at Bell Labs. But if you've ever seen Microsoft's language, C sharp, if you look at it, it's C+++++. You see that? Did you ever wonder why, for the computer science nerds out there, C sharp is C+++++. Look at the corners of it. So it's one better than C++. Right? Or it's a sharp where you have C and then you go up, semitone, right? So either way, it's a joke. Right? And Python, in fact, is a joke as well. Does anyone know where the name Python gets its name from? The snake? So there was a British comedy troupe called Monty Python who made a lot of very absurd, very random, and very funny humor. And so, the Python programming language is named after them. So. Things named after Monty Python. The Python programming language. There's been other stuff. Yeah, Ben and Jerry's ice cream. I told about Sprocket. Yeah, I guess I knew that. That's funny. Okay. So, yeah, I'm going to use Python Tutor for this. So that's kind of loops, and let's see here. Wild for loops. Yeah, I guess we'll just go through this. I guess we'll just go for Python today, real fast. So if you want to make your own function, use define, and basically, anytime you have like a reusable block of code that you want to use over and over again, for example, once you've written code to, like, I don't know, compute compound interest or something like that, you don't want to write it again, right? In computer science, the one thing we hate is repeating ourselves. I'll say that again. The one thing we hate is repeating ourselves. The one thing... Uh, and so what we do if we're going to ever use it a second time somewhere else in our code is we take our code and we put it into what's called a function. If you're familiar with the concept from algebra, you probably know what a function is already. It takes an input, it does some mathematical computations, and then gives you an output, right? So f of x equals, 2x or something like that. It takes an x and then returns twice the result. Computer science functions don't have to take input or give output technically, but you can kind of think of that as the kind of general idea, right? It's a reusable bit of computation you can do. So here we are making a function called output rocket text. It's using def to make a new function. The new function's name is output rocket text. And every time somebody calls output rocket text, it's going to print 54321, rocket's launching soon, and then returns from the function. Okay. And then it's going to call output rocket text, and it does so by putting the open close parentheses there. Jupyter kernel matching Python. Oh, that's interesting. Not found. Try running it again. Okay, no. 3.85 Python not found. Okay. Python 3.6, Python 3.8 default, PyTorch TensorFlow. I'm going to go with default and just see if that works. There we go. All right. So I guess if you get that error, pick the Python 3.8 default. I don't know. As your 3.812. Interesting. Okay. So, yeah, where were we here? And so the open close parentheses mean that it is a function. Like if you've ever seen, in algebra, right, f of x equals 2x or something like that, right? The parentheses mean that it's a function, right? Same thing in computer science. You will see parentheses, C++, Java, C#, they all use parentheses to indicate a function call. And so this is making a function call named output rocket text, takes no parameters, doesn't return any values, and you call it by using the open close parentheses as well. The name of the function, followed by open close parentheses, calls the function. And if we did this multiple times, then you will see it goes 54321, rocket launching, 54321, rocket launching, 54321, rocket launching, right? So each time I call output rocket text, it will do this chunk of code. Does that make sense to everybody? Yep. And you don't have to memorize anything I say, just run through the path yourself. And as always, play with it, right? Like, don't just like click run and be like, oh, okay, yeah, it looks good, next, just give me my points, professor. I'm not doing this so you guys get points. I'm doing this so that you can like learn Python, right? And if you already know Python, then yeah, fine, skip through everything to the end, screenshot it. I don't care. But I want you to learn at least the basics of Python, right? Because it makes you employable, and it's a cool language, and it's easy to learn, and you can do stuff with it. So it's for your own good, and because I'm going to assess you on it later as well. See if you paid attention. All right. So this opens a file. This is a function that will open a file, and it's going to open it in write mode. Okay. And So this is going to open a file called text.txt for writing, and then it's going to write these words to disk. Right? And then it closes the file. And so if we run this code together, so the kernel found again, good. All right, so it makes a variable named string path that holds the name of the file we're going to make. It's going to open that, and you don't have to do that like that. If you want, you could just be like bomb.txt or whatever. So it's going to open a file called bomb.txt, and then it's going to write to a file called bomb.txt, these 2 lines of text, and then it closes bomb.txt, and there you go. And so now we can open it up. Yeah, maybe that's why they made it a variable. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. So now we're going to open it again. We're going to read from it, and if you want to know what this thing does here, you can always print text list like that. Value IO. That's fair. Reopen and run. There we go. And so after we wrote all that stuff to disk, we're going to reopen the file, and we're going to call read lines on it. And read lines returns all of the lines of the text file. And if you've ever done I/O in C++, you're going to be like, what? C++ is a great language. Its I/O functionality is not good, in my opinion. It is not. It's not good, at least from a I'm learning to program perspective. Once you know what you're doing, it's okay. But like my students right now in CSci 41, second semester computer science, are struggling mostly on just the I/O side of things. Like how do I read a text file and things like that and parse it properly and stuff like that. And in Python, you just call read lines, and it gives you an array of all the lines in the or list, technically, of all the open the file, load it, and then let's just print out the whole thing, and it just gives you every line in the thing, and then in the file, and then you can say for every line in that list, print it. And so we're going to get first astronaut on the moon. That's a new line character that stands for hitting the enter key. Okay. And so you see that we're getting this weird extra spacing here, right? Because the print function puts a return also. So we're getting 2 returns. Okay. If you want to grab the first line, you can do that. Second line does that. Okay. And let's see if there's anything else useful here. Yeah, it's telling us this variable doesn't exist because the variable exists in a function. Variables that are made in a function don't exist outside of that function. And ditto the other way around. So if you say global rocket text, then it can use that variable outside of the function in the function itself. But globals are generally considered bad practice. Instead, what you do usually with a function is you make what's called a parameter to the function. Just like how in algebra, you can have a function called f of x, right? You could return 2 times x, right? So you know algebra, f of x equals 2x, right? This here is what it looks like in Python. That makes sense? So we're defining a function named f of x, and it's returning 2 times x. You can't just say 2x. I don't think that works in pretty much any language. You have to put the asterisk there. Does that make sense to you guys? F of x equals 2x. This is in Python here. This is just algebra. Yeah. Any questions about that? So if you want to do like an algebraic function, you can do that, and then you can print f of 10, which will print 20 to the screen, f of 1, which will print 2, f of negative 5, which will print negative 10, right? F of 10 is 20. 2 times 10 is 20. F of 1 is 2. F of negative 5 is negative 10. Are you guys cool with that? Is that, for those of you that have programmed before, is this easier or harder than other programming languages, do you think? For those of you that have never programmed before, I've gone over like pretty much most of the important stuff of Python in like one class. So, you know, if it's overwhelming, just work through the thing one page at a time and play with it. Like what I'm doing here. You can edit the fields. Like this isn't, like, you're not going to break anything. You're not going to fail the class if you have extra print statements in there. If you change something, it literally, that's what I want you to do. I want you to go in there and just manipulate it. See what happens, right? What happens if, you know, we have text input here and, I don't know, we multiply it by 2 or something. I don't know, right? You know, just mix it up, change it, see what happens. That's how you learn computer science. You have to always play with things and try different things and look at examples and modify the examples and run the modified examples and until it kind of clicks and you kind of understand things. The people who have the hardest time in computer science are the ones that are so afraid they're going to break something and get something wrong, they just never do anything. And if you never do anything, you will not learn, right? It's like trying to take Japanese and just never speaking Japanese. Just going to class every day and sitting there and listening to Kazasa sensei and being like, okay, I think I get it. But you never actually write anything. You never actually speak anything. You will not know Japanese, right? You need to sit there and play with it over and over again. Manipulate it in your brain. Try it out. Say something to Kazasa sensei. She's like, no, that is totally and terribly wrong. You're horrible at Japanese. You're like, oh, thank you. You know, this is how you say it. Okay, thank you. You know, and that's how you get better. You know, but some people are so afraid of like, oh, I might be wrong. I might get a little red squiggly. You know, no, not the red squiggly. No, I'm a failure. No, that's exactly the wrong attitude to have. You have to have an attitude of like being willing to fail, to try, to experiment, and if you do that, then eventually it'll just all click for you. And you're like, okay, I know Python. I know how to do this. You know. So never heard of them before. Seems simple enough. Good. What about absolute values? Like that. Absolute value of negative 5, or like that. Either way. Negative 10. All right, and so just like how Pythons work in algebra, you can, right? The sign work? Nah. Okay. Very inspirational. Nice, yeah. All right, and then they'll give you a little quiz to see if you're paying attention. You can just, yeah, do that. And then at the end of it, it starts with, basically gives you a little data science assignment is the last part of it. So let's just jump to the end here so you can see what that looks like because we're almost out of time. Activate sandbox. Yes, activate sandbox. Oh, Lord. Okay, well, while that's happening. Print. Okay, so this is an actual, like, you know, it's not like a huge program, but it's an actual program. So you can actually kind of see what it looks like, you know, when you actually have like a program. Like instead of, because one of the problems that I have with Jupyter Notebooks is it kind of slices everything up so narrowly that you don't actually get a feel for like what an actual program looks like, right? Like it kind of teaches you the individual, this is an if statement, this is a for loop, this is, but you know, when people actually write programs, it's not split up into 900 little chunks like that most of the time. Although some people do use Jupyter Notebooks, like for reals. Okay, so that work, good. All right, so it's going to print Artemis rover rock starter scanner starting. Create some variables here. It has a variable holding the location of a text file that has some data in it. It opens that text file. It then reads all of the lines out of the text file, and that's going to be a list of every line in the text file. And then it's going to print that all of those lines to the screen. And so if we come down here, file not found error. Okay. Sure with the code from the previous units living in our notebook. Confirm you run this code. So to make sure we've brought the code over. Well, that didn't work because we don't have the actual rocks.txt found. So let's go backwards in time. Wait, did that go backwards? That's what happened here. Backwards in time. Okay. Okay, there's where we write rocks.txt. Okay, go through it chapter by chapter. Don't skip to the end like me. But I'm just going to show you what it looks like at the end. This won't run unless you go through the thing in order. All right. So yeah, so it's going to read all the lines from the thing. It's going to print for every rock and rock list. So that is an empty list right now, right? Oh, no, here it is. Okay. So basically the file is going to contain a list of rocks and counts, I think. And for every rock in that rock list, it's going to print it to the screen. And so that'll, when you run the program, it'll show you, here's your file. It prints the file, closes the file. And then it is going to bring in these globals. These globals are up here. And it is going to get passed in a string. It's going to lowercaseify the string, make it all lowercase. If they passed in the word basalt, then it will print out found a basalt and increment this global variable here by 1. So every time you pass in basalt, the basalt count goes up by 1. Every time you pass in a breccia, it increments that by 1, and so on and so forth. So basically so down here at the very end here, for every rock in the rock list, so I guess the text file is going to contain a bunch of words like basalt, breccia, highland, regolith, that kind of stuff. And over and over again. And so for every rock in the file, it's going to call that function, passing in highland, 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 and then it'll increment highland, 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 highland by 1, and that's it. And at the end of the day, you're going to have a count in these 4 variables here that is how many times those words appear in the text file. So it'll then print the things to the screen. So you have to write the same code for the other ones, which is going to involve a lot of copying and pasting and changing on things. Then some basic data science. What was the biggest number? What was the smallest number? Right? And that's about it for the data science kinds of things. So that's an entire program, and that's kind of where you're going to end your Python journey, at least in this class. That's all I'm going to expect for you to know, nothing more and nothing less, because I will be assessing your Python knowledge after you complete the assignment. So that's basically Python in one day, at least the important bits of it. There's obviously more, but that's kind of the basics of Python, and you can go through it pretty quickly. I had a bunch of students kind of run through the whole thing the same day that I gave it. Didn't take them too long. So at the same time, don't wait to the last minute either, because it's never a good idea to wait to the last minute. If you get stuck or if something takes longer than you think it is, then you get a 0 and then you're a sad panda. So don't do that either. Just when you get a shot, just sit down, spend a couple hours learning it, and it's a really easy to learn language. I like it. I prefer C++ because I know C++ better. And C++ is faster. And C++ also has kind of a bad reputation, I think, to a certain extent at least. I don't think that it's really that much harder than Python once you kind of get into it, but there are definitely more sharp edges in C++ than in Python. How do you find your peer reviews for the corporate essay discussion? You go to the... I don't know if I can log in right now. Let's find out. Nope. I don't have my cell phone on me. Basically, on the discussion, there is a menu at the top right corner of the screen. You click on that, and there's a list that says peer reviews. You click on that, and it'll give you your peer reviews. If you can't find it, because I don't think it appears on mobile. So if you're on mobile or something like that, just message me, and I'll give you the list of peers you need for your peer reviews. Okay. That's it for today. Have fun. I'll see you guys on Monday. Peace.